Hi everyone, my name is Mimi Laver and I'm the Director of Legal Representation at the ABA Center on Children and the Law. Welcome and thank you so much for joining our conversation about multidisciplinary legal representation and family reunification. All of us that are speaking today feel very strongly that children belong with their parents, and we know that high quality legal representation is one tool to make that happen. Before we get going, I know you all join me in thanking my colleagues at the ABA section of Civil Rights and Social Justice for supporting this program. During our webinar, we will not likely have time for the presenters to answer your questions. However, please feel free to post the questions in the Q&A and we will try to get you answers either during the program or after. Please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves to each other and have a conversation, but for questions, please use the Q&A so that we can keep monitoring them. We will be sharing a recording of this program to everyone who is registered so that you can share it widely with all of your networks. As you know, June was National Reunification Month. This is a time to pause and honor the families who have reunified and those who supported them. More important than the month, though, is carrying this message throughout the year. Children should not be separated from their families except for safety reasons. But if they are, reunification is the most important goal. So this July 1st, we are starting the year with a reunification focus. I hope all of you will join us with that focus. And it's now my pleasure to introduce you to Lynn A. Johnson, who is the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services at the Administration for Children and Families. She's a strong advocate for transforming how we serve children and the outcomes we achieve. And she's here to kick us off. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to join you to help celebrate National Reunification Month. We have several celebration months in child welfare, but this one is particularly special. This one means families succeed. It means parents overcame incredibly difficult challenges and life circumstances. It means that we helped preserve family integrity, and nothing is more important than family. It is a reminder of the strength and resiliency that parents have, and it is a demonstration that the love parents have for their children should never be underestimated. Parents can do remarkable things when they are supported, empowered, and respected. That is why I am so grateful for the work of multidisciplinary legal teams that wrap support around parents. All of us need a team to make it through life's adversities. Multidisciplinary legal teams provide parents a team when they need it most. Providing a legal team that includes a social worker, a parent partner, helps parents feel more comfortable and makes attorneys more effective. I remember over 20 years ago putting together the first multidisciplinary team in my previous work. And I remember everybody talking about their role. And at that time, an attorney said to me, if everyone is caring about the best interests of the child, what am I here for? What a long way we've come to where we've moved from an adversarial system to one that is truly about all of us making a difference for families and kids. We know that these multidisciplinary teams ensure parents understand a system that can be overwhelming and intimidating. It helps parents become more engaged in the process, and it promotes personal agency. And with the New York City study, there is no question it helps produce better outcomes. As a field, there are few studies we can point to that show a particular model or way of work resulting in families getting back together 4 months earlier. It is simply remarkable, a true bright spot. Thank you to all of you who are doing this work and all who may learn from today and decide to begin using multidisciplinary legal teams. We strongly encourage all state, tribal, and territorial child welfare leaders to take advantage of federal funding to help support this approach. It is proven to make a positive difference for families. At the Administration for Children and Families and Children's Bureau, our overarching goal is to prevent the need for families to ever make contact with the foster care system. For those families that must make contact, we want to dramatically improve their experiences and our outcomes. Those providing multidisciplinary legal representation to parents and children are doing both. So thank you for your service to families, and thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so very much for joining us. So the rest of today's program will be broken into two parts. Our first panel will be moderated by Sharonda Selivanov. Sharonda is just an amazing person. She is a social service specialist at the Washington State Office of Public Defense, a leader in the Birth Parent National Network, a kinship caregiver, and a person who juggles countless responsibilities and a true inspiration to me, and I know many of the rest of you. So Sharonda, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mimi. I'm Sharonda Selivanov. I'm here in sunny Washington State. I'm just kidding, it's raining. I am also a reunified parent and currently a kinship care provider for my grandson. Washington State has been a trailblazer in implementing a multidisciplinary model, and I have been fortunate to be a partner with attorneys working diligently to get children home to their parents. I really can attest to the benefits as I have witnessed the power of what good representation produces, which is reunification. Today, you're going to hear from us about the effectiveness of the multidisciplinary approach, the opportunities that can be presented to jurisdictions by the dedicated funding from the Children's Bureau, benefits to states that support this model, and of course, the undeniable benefits of children and parents being reunified. So I'd like to introduce today our panelists. We're going to start off with Martin Guggenheim. Martin is a professor at the Clinical Law at New York City University, where he co-directs the Family Defense Clinic. He's also a member of the American Bar Association's National Parent Alliance and was among the researchers of the parent representation study conducted in New York City that will be focused on today's webinar. Second, we have David Hansel. He's a commissioner of the New York City Administration for Children's Services, which has the responsibility for children welfare, juvenile justice, and child care services in New York City. New York City has supported the multidisciplinary model for representing parents and child welfare legal proceedings for more than a decade. And David is also an attorney, and earlier in his career ran a legal service program for people with HIV and AIDS at Gay Men's Health Clinic, health crisis in New York City. And lastly, we have Jerry Milner, who is the Associate Commissioner of the Children's Bureau. I want to just thank all of the participants today, panelists, for participating today, and I'm truly, truly grateful to be among such passionate leaders that really support and work towards reunification. Marty's going to go ahead and start us off. Marty, could you tell us a little bit about what the interdisciplinary model or interdisciplinary representation is?
Yes, I'm going to say it specifically about New York City. There are variants on the theme, but the theme is similar everywhere. Interdisciplinary offices employ a team of professionals, including lawyers, social workers, parent advocates. In the interdisciplinary models, staff attorneys address in-court representation, and other members of the professional team, social work staff, parent advocates, address issues outside the courtroom to support the family, including advocating for parents at agency conferences, assisting parents to enroll in court-ordered programs, and otherwise attending to their needs.
Thank you. How does this differ from more familiar kind of legal representation afforded to parents across the country?
In most jurisdictions across the country, parents are assigned an attorney who is a solo practitioner, often a member of a rotating panel of lawyers available for such assignments. Or if they do work in an office as a salaried attorney, it's an office that is only with one discipline of lawyers. So most parents across the country are given an attorney only as their primary representative in the child welfare process.
So Marty, you just finished up a study. Could you tell us what your study ended up finding?
Yeah, let me take a little bit longer than just what it found, but also to frame it. So in 2007, New York City agreed to engage in an experiment that had a dramatic impact on child welfare practice. It offered contracts to 3 offices to become the primary lawyer assigned to represent parents in child welfare cases. It began cautiously, awarding separate contracts for 3 of its 5 counties to 3 different offices, and each office was expected to accept approximately half of the new case assignments. The remainder were to be assigned as before to panel lawyers. Panel lawyers are highly experienced private practitioners appointed to the panel based on their expertise and are reviewed annually to ensure that they perform their job well. Since 2004, these lawyers received $75 per hour for both in and out of court work. The New York City study was a quantitative study, a multi-year study of the cases brought in court by comparing cases handled by the panel attorneys on the one hand and the interdisciplinary offices on the other. The researchers examined over 28,000 cases between 2007 and 2014. This is critical. By using propensity score matching as the statistical design, they were able to equalize the groups of families compared on nearly 20 factors, including demographic characteristics, family size, severity of allegations, the judge before whom the case was brought, allowing the researchers to attribute any difference in outcome of cases to the single question of what kind of representation did they get. Ultimately, it studied 10,000 families and 18,000 children over a 4-year period. It found that the kind of representation afforded to parents makes a dramatic difference in the length of time children spend in foster care. Giving parents interdisciplinary representation resulted in families being reunited far sooner than would otherwise happen. 43% more often in the first year and 25% more often in the second year. Giving parents legal interdisciplinary representation allowed children to be released to their families. 18% more children were reunified with their families within 2 years if they were represented by family defender offices. 40% more children ended up with a permanent disposition of guardianship when they had interdisciplinary representation. Ultimately, the study found that full implementation of multidisciplinary representation in New York City would reduce the foster care population by 12% and annually reduce foster care costs by $40 million as compared with an exclusive reliance on the panel attorney system that it has replaced.
Thank you so much for that, Marty. I can't help but think about just parents that have had the opportunity to have the support, the guidance. We're talking about children from a parent's perspective. It is so important to have that type of legal representation that really, really makes them feel a part of a team, that their voice is being heard, that they're not just being talked to and talked at and talked about, but they are a collaborator in their own case. So I love the idea that parents don't have to be spectators. They get to be participants while working towards reunification. David, we're going to talk a little bit to you. From your perspective at the Child Welfare Agency, what is the most important result or the aspect from the New York University study?
Well, thanks so much, Sharonda. Let me say, the results of the study as described by Assistant Secretary Johnson and now by Marty Guggenheim are very powerful for us. Shortening length of stay in foster care, reducing the foster care population, reunifying kids with their families more quickly. Those are exactly the things that we strive for in our program in New York City. So we were thrilled to see the results of this research last year and to now have empirical evidence that supports the investment that we've made in this in New York City for quite some time. Let me just say a little bit maybe about the history of our utilization of the multidisciplinary model, because it does go back quite a ways in New York City. I have to start by acknowledging the woman who is truly the godmother of this model, my longtime friend and colleague, Sue Jacobs. She founded the Center for Family Representation in 2002. And the model that she created there, as Marty said, in 2007, was replicated by New York City through a number of different institutional providers across the city and has continued to be funded by New York City ever since then. And I will tell you, as the administrator of the Child Welfare Agency in New York City, we believe that high quality representation of parents and children who are involved in the child welfare legal system is absolutely critical. And based on the success that we've had with the model in New York City, I can enthusiastically recommend that other child welfare agencies across the country consider the benefits of adopting New York City's legal approach, the multidisciplinary approach. And let me just say a little bit about why we think it's been so successful in New York City. We, of course, are often adversaries with legal providers in individual proceedings in family court. But the truth is, the Child Welfare Agency, the parents' attorneys, the children's attorneys, we all have the same goal in nearly all of our cases. And that is to ensure that parents and children are able to remain safely together at home with supports in place, or if that's not possible, to reunify as quickly and as safely as they possibly can. So with these mutual goals, we're able to collaborate both on individual cases, but also on systemic reforms. And I think this has truly benefited not just thousands of families and children in New York City, but has really benefited our child welfare system. It's led to faster engagement in services by parents. It's led to more children remaining at home. And it's led, as the study shows, to faster reunification from foster care and more expeditious resolution of cases in court. So we think for all those reasons that this program has really made a huge difference to us in New York City. The research now confirms that, and we very much hope that other jurisdictions across the country will adopt it.
Thank you, David. Can you tell us, what do you think the impact of this work has actually done in your agency?
It's a great question, Sharonda. I think it's really benefited our work in a number of ways. First of all, you know, our system in New York City, our child welfare system is very much focused on conferencing as a tool. We like to, at various stages in the process, bring together multiple stakeholders to help parents plan for the safety of their children. And so the multidisciplinary model often brings social workers and parent advocates into those family team conferences, where they can discuss with parents and with our child protective specialists issues like safety planning, services, visitation, permanency planning, reunification planning. And we found that having a social worker and a parent advocate from our legal provider organizations in those conferences often increases a parent's receptivity to engaging in services and service planning, because the parent has an advocate, their own advocate in the room, who can help support them in their own decision making. And especially, I would say, having parent advocates who have lived experience with the child welfare system really bolsters the decision making and the self-advocacy of parents. But it also improves the process in court. Because we have regular, ongoing interaction with attorneys from our multidisciplinary models, we've built relationships between our attorneys and those attorneys. Often things can get resolved that way. Often things can get resolved between the social workers and the child protective specialists without the attorneys having to be involved at all, which speeds things up and is to the benefit of families as well. And you know, we do things like informing each other in advance of filing motions in court. Again, all with the purpose of expediting the process and trying to move towards reunification as quickly as we can. And then finally, as I mentioned, we work very closely with the providers who implement the multidisciplinary models on systemic reforms. We meet with them on a regular basis. We have many interagency work groups. And we look at this not just from the perspective of resolving individual cases, but also from the perspective of what can we do to make the system work better for parents, for children, for families. And so having these dedicated, skilled attorneys who are focused specifically on representing parents in family court enables us to identify and address many systemic issues that I think has really resulted in the strengthening of our child welfare system and our child welfare legal system in New York City.
Thank you, David. I'm just going to speak a little bit on some of the things you shared, just as a parent that, of course, has navigated the system. And I cannot speak loudly enough of the need of the support of the translator, of the guide, of what an advocate or a social worker offers. Parents are involved in a very powerful system that has their child, and they are scared and fearful. And I think that sometimes we have to recognize the human experience of not understanding this system and then having your child waiting there. And so the advocate offers far more than I think that can be measured. I think that this is a place where individuals just gather in a very intimate and vulnerable space, sharing their own triumphs and their own fears and leveling that so that people understand that they are supported, that they're not alone, and that their experience is to be shared, and that we can gather strength from one another. So I just want to really echo and speak loudly that parents need parents to show them and to guide them and to let them know they're going to be okay and that they can do this. So I'm so grateful that your agency continues to support this type of work. What, if anything, have you or other professionals in the system told you about their views on the impact of the interdisciplinary representation?
Well, really, quite a bit. As I say, it's enabled us to build relationships between our attorneys and the attorneys in the provider organizations. We do work, as Marty said, also with so-called panel attorneys, individual attorneys who represent parents and represent children in family court, and we have good relationships with them, and many of them are very competent. But really, to have attorneys in the multidisciplinary programs who are dedicated just to representing parents in child welfare proceedings enables us to build relationships with them that enables us to share information, I think to present, frankly, better information to judges in family court, and to get better resolutions for children. And then in addition, as I mentioned, the fact that providers have social workers and parent advocates, which I completely agree, Sharonda, are very critical, a critical component really of all parts of the child welfare system, but certainly part of the legal system, enables so many issues to get resolved outside of court, to get resolved without the involvement of attorneys or judges. And it contributes to what is really our goal in situations in which we're working with families in the child welfare system, and that is to understand the challenges that parents are facing and to get them the services that they need. And having social workers and parent advocates with parents working with us, our child protective specialists, to identify and connect them to those services has really enhanced that process. I'll also say something which is maybe a little bit more mundane, but which is important, and that is because the multidisciplinary providers have teams of attorneys and have supervisors as well. That means that in court cases, one of the things that we hate to see happen in court cases is that they get adjourned, and it postpones the resolution of those cases and postpones reunification. And because of the teamwork that goes on within the provider organizations, in situations where one attorney may be unavailable for some reason, usually another attorney from those organizations can step in and handle the case without missing a beat, or with the support of the social worker. So that means fewer adjournments, that means faster resolution of cases, and that means faster reunification for families.
Thank you, David. What above all else would you want to say to the child welfare leaders if they were considering changing their legal representation model in their jurisdiction?
Well, I can imagine for some folks it may seem somewhat counterintuitive that New York City is funding attorneys who are often adversarial to us in court. But we believe, as I said, that it has really improved. It has improved the quality of representation, but most importantly, it's improved the outcomes for children. Raising the bar in terms of the quality of representation, having the dedication and the skill that the attorneys from these organizations bring to the child welfare legal process, having the support of social workers and parent advocates contributes, as I said, to really what are all of our mutual goals, which is keeping kids safely at home with their families whenever we can, and reunifying kids from foster care with their families as quickly as possible when we need to do that. And those are our North Stars, and I have absolutely no doubt that this model has enabled us to do that. The evidence and the research now shows that. It's icing on the cake, that, as Marty said. It's saving us about $40 million a year in foster care expenditures in New York City. That's wonderful, especially going to be nice going into the next couple of years when we know budgets are going to be very tight in New York City and all across the country. But that's not what's really important. What's really important is it's led to better outcomes for children, and that's why we've been committed to it for over a decade and intend to continue.
Thank you, David. And I so appreciate that there's so many aspects or people inside of a case that are able to benefit from this model. And it really, really supports every person who touches a case with this model. We're going to hear from Jerry. Jerry has been incredibly supportive about the multidisciplinary model. Jerry, can you let us know why?
Okay, sure. That's it's pretty easy to answer that. And let me say, first of all, I just so wholeheartedly agree with everything that both Marty and David have said before me. It's not hard to be supportive of this. Because within the Children's Bureau, we have a very firm belief that parents and children should have legal representation in all child welfare proceedings out there. Their lives, their well-being are at stake, and they should not go unrepresented in very complex legal proceedings that many of us, including me if I were in that situation, don't quite fully understand. A well-functioning child welfare system requires that, in my opinion. We also believe that the representation must be high quality. Not just any lawyer, but lawyers who are proactive, who understand and who have basic competencies in child welfare issues, and who are positioned to give the amount of time and understanding to representing their parents. I think one of the reasons, Sharonda, that I feel so strongly about this interdisciplinary model is that because for the last 3+ years, I've sat down with parents who've been a part of the child welfare system in probably close to 40 or more than 40 states right now, to hear what their concerns were. And without exceptions, we've heard from parents all across the country about the need to have the support of peer partners, people who have similar experiences, of social workers to help them navigate the complexity of our child welfare system, in addition to having high quality representation in court. If we listen to those voices and we act on them, it leads us to a model like the interdisciplinary model. I'm very supportive of this because we know that it leads to more engagement, greater parental engagement in service planning, service delivery. The qualitative part of the New York study affirms for us that it increases parents' access to service, and it leads to increased advocacy for parents who may not otherwise have all of the skills, the background, the information to be able to advocate for themselves. And in child welfare proceedings, advocating on behalf of our families, our parents, is just such a critical part of the whole system. Is certainly, as David and Marty have already mentioned, we're supportive of this because it does lead to faster permanency for children who absolutely must enter the foster care system, and no observed increases in the safety risk for those children who achieve permanency at a faster pace. One of the big reasons that I'm so supportive of this is because it pays attention to child and family well-being in addition to safety. And in order to help families thrive, which we've talked about again in the Children's Bureau for the last 3.5 years here, even in the face of adversity, we have to strengthen their well-being so that they can, even in those very, very difficult times, have the resilience that they need to care for their children safely. And I'll just another plug for the study here. I'm supportive because now we have results. We have actual results that show reduced length of stay in foster care, and that should be something that we're all committed to whenever it's possible.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm struck by that we have the language reunification. And then I think about parents that are navigating this very complex system and the need to have the supports, the guidance, the informers that actually speak to the intent. If your intent is reunification, how are we arming people to actually be able to achieve that? And I can imagine, as a person who has navigated this system, doing it on my own. It's just, I can't wrap my head around how you would be successful in getting your child home. And so I hope that our language matches our intent and that our actions support all of that. And this team is exactly what that's all about. Our public child welfare administrators, what do you think is the most important reason for them to get behind this model?
Well, for all the reasons that David Hansel has already said, he certainly seems to have covered that ground quite well. First, I'll say that I was a state child welfare director in another life, and if I would have had access to this kind of a model, there's no question in my mind now that I would have wanted to use it, that I would want to make that available to the families that I worked with when I was carrying a caseload and that were part of the system when I was a state director. Like David mentioned, I've heard honestly too many directors out there say something like, why would I want to support lawyers to fight against us? And I certainly think that's a flawed perspective when as David said, we all want the same things for our families. We want our families and our kids to be able to stay together whenever possible safely. If it's not possible, to get back together as quickly as possible. We want our kids, our children, to spend less time in foster care and to be able to achieve reunification ideally, and if not, other forms of permanency faster. I believe that this model is a direct pointer to that outcome there. We want to strengthen parents' protective capacities so that they have to, so that they're able, I should say, to weather very difficult situations over time, and that we don't repeatedly see children maltreated or needing to enter foster care again. And I would say that this is the kind of a model that wraps those supports around families and is designed to achieve just that. I've already mentioned increased parental engagement. we want all of us, for parents to be engaged in their service plans, to have voice about what they need and what kinds of services are going to be able to help them. Unfortunately, we know from our federal child and family services reviews that virtually all our states out there are struggling with adequate parent engagement. And it becomes part of program improvement plans time and time again. And certainly this model and what we have read and heard about the interviews with parents who have benefited from it, increase their ability to be engaged in very tangible ways. And it's noteworthy that few other programs and models out there, in my opinion, are as directly focused on parental engagement as the model is. And I guess finally, for those of us who think in terms of dollars and cents, again, I'll just emphasize that it can save us a heck of a lot of money. If we cut 4 months off the average time that kids spend in foster care and are able to go back to families that are well equipped to care for them safely, it just makes that kind of economic sense to use a model like this.
I just want to add, Jerry, that I think that when I reflect on my experience working currently, I'm not fighting with anyone. I'm really a partner. I'm here to work with you to make your job easier, to share in a collective agenda. And the agenda is, how do we get children home? So this is not a fight. This is a partnership of strengthening the team so that we are sure to affect change for the family and get children safely home. So I think it's so important for people to remember this is a team and we're not against anyone. Yep. We all should have the same vision of how do we get these kids home?
Yeah. And that's the kind of culture shift, I think, that we have to be about in using something like this very effectively.
Yeah. Is there something more that the federal government can do to encourage the widespread change to the interdisciplinary representation across the U.S.?
Yeah, there's always more that we can do here. I'm just so happy that we were very recently able to clarify in our policy that our federal funds can actually be used to cover the cost of peer partners, of social workers who are part of an interdisciplinary team out there, in addition, to paying for the costs of the legal representation itself. We certainly hope and believe that this will go a long way in promoting the use of this model out there. Where we have the opportunity, again, I mentioned our child and family services reviews and program improvement plans. We are actively encouraging states to build this kind of an approach into some of those plans. Ultimately, those are state decisions, but where we can see the link between very effective legal representation in a team model and the outcomes that states are achieving on behalf of children and families. We want to promote that, and using whatever kinds of tools or vehicles that we have. Some other things that I think we can do, or we can certainly promote, and this isn't just the federal government, but all of our partners out there, except for, and I may be revealing that I'm not as informed as I should be here, but except for Vivek Sankaran's study a while back of the Detroit model there, where I think there was something like 110 children who received the benefits of this kind of a model, and none of them actually entered the foster care. I don't think that the research literature is terribly rich right now around how a model like this can prevent the need for foster care. And I believe that some of this could be attributable to the timing of when a team becomes involved with the family, but certainly over time we need to have more research, more study on the effects of the model on preventing foster care wherever that's possible. And I believe that we have an opportunity to really promote that. Another thing that we're pretty excited about here at ACF right now, earlier this week, the president signed an executive order that will allow us, in fact, direct us to promote high quality legal representation for both parents and children. And within the next 6 months, the onus is on us to provide additional guidance to states around the flexible use of federal funds, including pre-petition representation in terms of states' efforts to prevent children from being removed and to safely reunify whenever that's possible. And we're also directed to ensure collection of data regarding how states use that money for that purposes. Another thing the executive order does, I think, that will contribute to this, we're directed to modify our 2 major review programs, our Title 40 reviews and our Child and Family Services reviews, to focus much more deliberately on the substance of reasonable efforts to prevent removals, to reunify children and their parents, and to achieve children's permanency goals. It can't be news to anybody on the line today that our reasonable efforts requirements in many situations are not firmly grounded in substantive efforts to help families stay together or get back together. And we want this opportunity to look at the substance of reasonable efforts and how that's affected by legal representation and by a model such as this. I think one other thing I'll mention is that we know that since we came out with the policy revision allowing federal funds to be used for legal representation, that states are asking for a lot more guidance, with a lot of technical questions, and very shortly we'll be forthcoming with additional guidance on that to help with the implementation of this across the country. So, thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm wondering if anyone has anything that they'd like to add that already hasn't been said.
Sharonda, I might just respond to one question I see in the chat, which I think is an important one. And that is, question is, isn't it a conflict of interest for a child welfare agency to be funding attorneys that represent parents? Great question, and the answer is yes, it would be. And actually for that reason, that's not how we do it in New York City. I should have mentioned this. The funding and the contracts for the multidisciplinary programs are actually administered by the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, not by ACS, not by the Child Welfare Agency. We have no involvement in funding those contracts, negotiating those contracts, or monitoring those contracts. And it's precisely for that reason, to make sure there's no conflict of interest between our representation and the representation of parents. So I just wanted to make that clear to other child welfare administrators who might be wondering how they could actually do this appropriately.
Marty, is there anything you want to add?
Sure, although I'm so pleased with all that we've all gotten to hear that what I really want to be sure is the takeaway, I think, has been echoed by everybody today. And what I would add is that one of the hidden ways in which child welfare as a field has been disadvantaged is that when it came into being in the 1970s as a court system involving state or local government charging parents with civil wrongs, the court administrators, the professionals in the field asked, what system does this most seem similar to? And the answer was criminal defense, criminal prosecution. And so what most courts did throughout the country, probably every, is they asked themselves, well, what kind of representation do we give to defendants in criminal cases? And then they said, well, so let's give the same kind of representation to parents in these cases. And that was a gigantic conceptual mistake that we're still experiencing in most of the country. Lawyers, you know, for better or worse, aren't liked by most people who aren't lawyers. Child welfare administrators, the ones I've spoken to over the years, commonly react to my call for them to embrace us as their partners, think I'm nuts. They say, well, we don't trust lawyers, you're aggressive, you're adversarial, you're gonna make our job worse. But the difference between criminal prosecution and child welfare is the state's goal in criminal prosecution really is adversarial to the defendants. But here, the state's goal is indistinguishable. We're all here to achieve the same thing. The child welfare canon holds that children should be only placed in foster care when necessary. It reflects the universally recognized understanding that the needless separation of children from their families can profoundly harm them. And what everyone here today has said emphatically is this kind of representation afforded to parents is really the best friend that the child welfare administrators are not quite yet aware that they have. That looking to us as partners will allow them to achieve the same success that they've been striving for all these years. We help achieve the outcome that everybody wants. We did a second study, and this was a qualitative study. We interviewed the professionals in the courts, in the system. Here's what one judge said. The new offices changed the culture at court. One children's lawyer added that the lawyers in these offices made us do our jobs better, contributed to the court being more of a real court. It used to be that attorneys would just tell the court what was happening, but it missed all the mistakes and errors that went along with it. We make sure that what is known about a family is accurate. And it's hard to overstate the importance of that one thing. And then finally, what I would add, again, echoing what we've heard, is that we achieve these results in no small part because we attend much better to our clients' well-being. We attend to their emotional well-being. We behave as empathic, emotionally supporting professionals, paying attention to their needs and matters beyond the formal charges, demonstrating a keen commitment to their goals, appearing with them anytime they have to do something, minimizing the trauma they experience, and helping them survive what hopefully is the worst nightmare of their life.
Thank you, Marty. I just want to, I do have one question in the chat that I wanted us to get to is first of all, can Marty or David, can you guys talk about a little bit of the representation for kiddos? For kids?
New York has offered child representation since long before they gave parents representation. Every child in New York City is represented in every proceeding by a lawyer, and if there's a conflict, there'll be 2 or 3 lawyers on the case.
David, did you want to add anything there?
No, exactly as Marty said. Every parent, every child in a family court proceeding in New York City gets separate representation.
Well, I want to thank all of you guys for your passion, for your guidance, for your hard work. I think what I will leave this conversation with is the culture shift. The culture shift speaks of prevention, and the culture shift speaks of reunification. What we have is the data and the research that says foster care at some points can cause irreparable damage to our kids. That is not the intent. Our intent is we want them to be safe, we want them to be home, and we want a system that supports that. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to turn this back over to Mimi.
Thank you, Sharonda. Thank you so much for moderating, and to the panel. Thank you all very, very much. This was really informative. And to all of the participants who are giving questions and answers and participating in the chat, thank you. Keep them coming. But please know that we are trying to answer them as we can, and you will enjoy, I know, the next panel, who will be really getting to some of the nuts and bolts questions that you have. They may not answer them question by question, but they will be demonstrating to you the roles that the whole team plays. So I'm really pleased to introduce you to a team from the Dependency Advocacy Center. The Dependency Advocacy Center has been providing interdisciplinary legal representation for parents in Santa Clara, California since 2008. Annalisa Chung is their Chief Executive Officer. She's an early adopter of Reunification Month, a member of the National Alliance for Parent Attorneys Steering Committee, and a fierce advocate for families. She's going to introduce the rest of the panel, and so I'm just going to turn it over to her, and I know that you will all enjoy hearing from them. Thank you, guys.
Hi, thank you, and good morning. I cannot tell you how humbling it is to be part of this webinar today. The panel of folks that we've just heard from are some of my personal heroes in child welfare and family defense. Having practiced as an attorney and now an administrator in this field for almost 20 years, I told Mimi that I could never have named any of the folks in the Children's Bureau until Jerry Milner and David Kelly and folks of that ilk have stepped up in such an unprecedented way and showed a real understanding of what it means to support and advocate for families in the child welfare system. If reunification is truly the North Star that should be guiding our work, then we have to take their lead and commit to investing in the things that we know are going to move the needle. High quality legal representation for parents and children, prevention, solid prevention efforts to avoid unnecessary entry into foster care, as you've heard, and effective interdisciplinary advocacy, which of course we're talking about today. So thank you very much for inviting us to join you. As Mimi mentioned, I am the CEO and co-founder of Dependency Advocacy Center, and we are a nonprofit family defense organization representing parents and conflict children in Santa Clara County, California. When we created our structure in 2008, it was with the firm belief that after having represented hundreds of parents and children in our system, that traditional legal advocacy was just not enough to adequately serve our families. And while it took some time to build our team, I know there were a lot of questions about funding, and I wish I could get to all of them today, but while it took some time, our interdisciplinary staff now includes 12 case-carrying attorneys, 3 in-house social workers, and 9 mentor parents, 6 mothers and 3 fathers, all of whom are former clients of ours. We additionally have 3 former mentor parents serving on our management team, our administrative support team, and our board of directors. So we're really serious about embedding the wisdom of their lived experience in our work. And I can tell you we are a stronger organization for it. I am joined today by 2 of DAC's incredible advocates, our social worker, Kira Johnson, and mentor parent, Araceli Cervantes, who will introduce themselves shortly. Our hope is to encourage folks who are thinking about incorporating social workers and mentor parents into their family defense team to really take that next step. You will not regret it. We could talk about the benefits of this model for much longer than we have today, but Mimi will have our contact information for anyone who wants to reach out at the end of this webinar. Yesterday was June 30th, and it marked the end of Reunification Month. And while COVID has caused us to postpone our local in-person event, we have been proudly celebrating Reunification Day in Santa Clara County for the last decade. And honestly, it was about time. Like many other counties, we had been celebrating Adoption Day long before Reunification Day was ever a concept. And I remember as a staff attorney feeling deeply conflicted when I would see the flyers and the balloons in the courthouse. You know, I thought, why are we only celebrating an event that in most cases resulted from an unsuccessful reunification effort? So there were press releases and media coverage, and, you know, as all of you know, our system is largely misunderstood by the general public. So what sort of messaging does that send when we're not also acknowledging the successes that reflect the goals of our system, reunification, family preservation, and the hard work it takes to get us there? I'm happy to say that our event has grown every year, and it is a collaboration now between the court, the attorneys, the agency, child advocates, First Five, our local government. We honor families who have overcome significant obstacles to successfully reunify, and we take the time to lift up the stories of love and resilience that they represent. And so I just want to take this moment to encourage all of you to engage with your justice partners, support Reunification Day in your jurisdiction, because it's a powerful opportunity to pull the lens back and reorient ourselves and our system and the larger community to that North Star that we're talking about. And when our Reunification Day heroes receive their awards, they often talk about their dependency court experience and frequently express how grateful they are to have had a mentor parent by their side. Araceli is one of our mentors, one of our amazing mentors who works with mothers participating in Dependency Wellness Court, which is our drug treatment court. And she's going to share with you a bit of her reunification story and why she is so passionate about working on this interdisciplinary team. Araceli?
So my name is Annalisa Cervantes. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. So I'm gonna just give you a little bit of my background. I started using drugs at 14 years old. I was in and out of institutions, every juvenile Santa Clara department I have been in. As my drug use progressed, I ended up having 3 kids. My 2 older kids never got into the system, thank God, because my mother took care of them, but my last child was in the system. On February 7th, 2014 was the worst day of my life, but also was a blessing. That day, I remember putting my daughter in her room to watch a movie, and I go into my room and I'm setting up myself to give myself an IV shot because I was an IV user. I looked, and I was at the edge of my bed, and I looked over, and I weighed no more than maybe 80 pounds, maybe max 90. I looked so gross and I felt disgusting, but I still proceeded and gave myself the shot. As soon as that shot hit my veins, Santa Clara Police Department was kicking my door in. My ex-boyfriend hit a police officer with my car, and they came to look for him at my house because the car was registered under my name. I remember that day it was raining, it was cold. They came in at gunpoint. They pulled us out. I was handcuffed and I was sitting on a chair. One of the police officers got my daughter and they put her on my lap. She had to hold on to me because I couldn't wrap my arms around her. So she had her little hands behind my neck. And until this day, I can still feel them, her little grip, so tight. They were searching the house and of course, looking for him and looking for things and clues or whatever. And I looked up to the officer and I said, could I call my mom to come pick up my daughter? And he said, no, CPS was on their way. At that point, I just broke down. I was apologizing to my little girl. I felt like the worst person in the whole entire world. The police officer handcuffed me, so I was able to put her in the back of the CPS car. When I did that, she was crying and holding on to me so tight. I can still feel the pain in my chest. It felt like an elephant was stepping on me as I placed her in the back of that car. From that moment on, I knew that I was just done with that life because of what the pain that I caused her. Putting her in that car changed me forever. I have been through a lot of stuff, and that was the worst pain that I've ever felt in my life. So not knowing where my little girl was going, didn't know if she was going to be safe, who she was going with, were they going to treat her right, was she going to be abused, what was going to happen to her. I ended up getting a phone call. I called my mom, and of course they're upset with me. I mean, I hated myself. I didn't even want to be in my own skin. So I could just imagine what they were feeling. My mom told me not to worry, but she was going to get her out. So my second phone call was to her dad, and he told me not to call him back because he didn't want to get caught up. I ended up getting to the holding cell. I had drugs on me and I flushed them down the toilet because at that point, I knew that I didn't want to go back to that lifestyle. When I went in, I was looking at a lot of time. I was looking at maybe 12 years. I was blessed because that year is when AB 109 came out. So I ended up getting a blended sentence, which was 3 years. I had a year credit, and then I did 2 years out. So I did House on the Hill, which is a program for mothers where you take your children. So the first week that I got out, I had the best attorney that you could think of. She had me in House on the Hill with my daughter within the first week. I did the whole 6 months. I graduated. I ended up going to a THU, and with the blessing of DWC and my mentor, I ended up getting into a 2-year program, which was called Ricardo Apartments. And I got all my babies back, including the 2 older ones. And as then I kept building up. I've been a mentor now for 2 years. The compassion and the hope and the strength that I have for these women comes from my own living experience. You know, if I can just touch one, you know, it gives me so much pride to know that, you know, you're able to change your life. If you would have seen me before and to the point now, you would never believe how much change I have done. I would never think I would be speaking in front of all of you guys, telling my story about my daughter, and it's such a personal story. And I don't know what else to say, but I'm just very, very happy to be here, and thank you for giving me the time to listen.
Thank you so much for that, Araceli. And she is going to share some of how she has been able to draw upon that personal experience and really help some of the moms that we represent in just a minute. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Kira, please. Now, she has been a critical part of our family defense team at DAC. She's one of our in-house social workers. And Kira, if you can just talk a little bit about your background and why being part of an interdisciplinary team has been meaningful to you.
So my name's Kira Johnson, and I'm a master's level social worker. And my time with DAC, and prior to working with DAC, I was a public health social worker, and I also worked with programs that focused on universal basic income for families living in poverty. With DAC, I have the opportunity to be a part of an interdisciplinary team that really focuses on supporting families and making sure that the services that we provide are unique and individualized to what the families need. So a lot of times my contact with the family is like that first supportive point of entry into the system, because the other contacts have been very intrusive and a lot of times traumatic and anxiety provoking. So a lot of times I'm one of the first people that is on their team, as well as the mentor parents like Araceli. So it's an opportunity for me to start to build that relationship and really work on building trust. And before I can do any of that, though, I just have to recognize the crisis, the trauma, the challenges that that family is dealing with. And I take my role as an opportunity to interrupt that, to give them that moment of peace and calm, to kind of buffer that trauma and give them an opportunity to kind of breathe and not have to feel all that anxiety. So the interdisciplinary team tries their best to respond, like I said, to the individual needs of the case. And internally, we try to stay in touch and have an open line of communication. Externally, my role is to coordinate with all those moving pieces that are going on around that family, whether that's the criminal justice system, of course, CPS. A lot of parents have children that may be, have IEPs or have different things going on academically. So I may interface with school professionals, teachers, and just different people. So whatever is going on and whatever organizations those families are interacting with, I try to make sure that I'm able to connect and assess and support the client as they're navigating all these different systems that they're touching. So we try to make sure that the families first have an opportunity to build a relationship with us, whether that's with me individually or collectively, but we try to make sure whatever the needs are of that family, that I either support them or Araceli or whomever the mentor parent is on the team. And this may be having just conversations over the phone, meeting face to face. With COVID, we've had to be really creative about ways to still build those relationships. But the relationship is the cornerstone of the contact with the family. And let's be honest, a lot of times our attorneys don't have the time to build those really trusting relationships. And that's where the social worker and the mentor parent really step up and do that. So we try to identify the additional needs that parents and families need. When it comes to the mentor parent, they have that lived experience and they can connect with them with a lot of things that they've gone through and that may have brought them into the system. And for me, I try to provide them that support on the clinical side when we're in department meetings and different things like that. I speak the same language as the people at the department. So not only do they have an ally that has gone through what they've gone through with the mentor parent, they also have an ally that can help them navigate the child welfare system. So it's really important to have a social worker on the team because there are a lot of those department meetings that attorneys cannot attend. Because when an attorney shows up in a meeting, it becomes a legal issue. When a social worker attends or a mentor parent, we're able to sit across from the table with that family member or sit next to them and support them and advocate for them in those department meetings. So it's really important to have eyes and ears, whether it's within the community or within those department meetings, that are supportive for the families we serve. You're on mute.
I sure am. Thank you so much for that, Kira. I know that many folks that are participating in today's webinar, I can see on the comments and questions too, have not yet worked with an interdisciplinary team or just beginning to incorporate social workers and mentor parents on their staff. Because we have limited time today, we thought the best way to convey what this might look like is to give 2 examples of real success stories that highlight the impact of this holistic approach to representation. So I'm going to swing it back to you again, Kira, to tell your very powerful story of a recent reunification success.
Yes, very recent, actually. Since the shelter in place has been lifted, this mom has been reunified with her children. But prior to that, the first time I met this mom was at one of the agency meetings. It's called a Child and Family Team Meeting, a CFT. And I was assigned to her case. And the first time I met her was at this meeting, like literally moments before going into the meeting. And she had on a black sweatshirt with a hood. The hood was on her head. She's sitting in the chair with her arms folded and making like no eye contact with anybody. And this meeting is where decisions about placement, decisions about what comes next for the case plan, how we're going to proceed in court and what the recommendations are. So this is like one of the most important meetings next to probably a hearing for this family and these children. So mom is upset clearly by her body language and just the posturing. And she's expressing some of the concerns that her children have shared with her about what's going on in the foster homes. So the kids had reported to her that they had been left alone, were being bullied by other children that were in the home. And there were a few other things that mom was expressing to the team. And in this room, in addition to myself and mom, the foster parents of the children, her children were in the room, their support. You have the department social worker, the department social worker supervisor. You have all these people in supportive roles for everybody else around the table, but then just mom and me, who had just met her that day. So she was really frustrated. And she didn't feel like they were hearing what her concerns were about her children. And after, you know, saying all these things and feeling dismissed, mom got up and basically just stormed out of the room. And I'm kind of sitting there like, okay, I just met this lady. Do I chase her out the room, or, you know, what do I do? And I sat in the room as she walked out, and there was a lot of chatter about how she came across as belligerent and she's so angry and you can't talk to her. And, you know, that's why she's in this system. So there were all these things being said about this mom. So in the best way that I could advocate for her, I asked, could we reschedule the meeting and hopefully, you know, talk with her and kind of pick up where we left off. And the department obliged, because the parents should always be in the room when decisions are being made about their children. So they were able to do that. And I took that opportunity to call mom and try and set up an opportunity for us to just sit down and talk. And that was probably the best thing that I could have done for our connection and our relationship. And what we ended up doing was, the next day she was off from work, is we went to Starbucks and over coffee and tea chatted for about 4 hours. And we talked about everything from kids, our upbringing, recipes, relationships, you know, just a little bit of everything. But what I learned in those 4 hours is that this mother was a product of foster care. She had been in and out of foster care the majority of her life and had aged out of foster care at 18. And at that time was pregnant with her oldest child, who was now in care. So in that room, what I recognized was that wasn't just a mom advocating for her kids, but that was a former foster child that was triggered by the same system that she was involved in. And that for her was just too overwhelming. And she couldn't articulate that and say, this is what I'm feeling, and may not have even known in that moment that's what she was feeling. But through us developing our relationship, we've been able to talk about some of the things that happened to her, and she has really been trying to work hard on to protect her children from. We've also talked about the mommy guilt and, you know, all the things that parents a lot of times deal with. So after that conversation, I feel like now I'm armed with a relationship. Like, that's my greatest strength going into a meeting with this mom. And when we got into the next meeting, she started talking, said all the things that she needed to say, and again, got triggered. Jumped up out the seat, walked out. Now, we had talked about not doing this, but it happened. And this time I followed her. Got her to get a sip of water. We talked. Her daughter happened to be at this meeting. And I said to her, you are upset, and that's okay. I'm upset. But what we've got to be able to do is go back into this room. And she just kind of looked and was angry. She took another sip of water. And I said, the other thing is, your daughter is here. You have an opportunity to role model and teach her that even when people say things that you don't like, even when you're in a situation where things are not going in your way, you still stand up. You still handle your business. And she looked at me again, kind of mean, turned around, walked back in the room, and she took care of business. And several months later, it's like 6 months later, she was at the point where she was going to get overnight visits, and then COVID hit. And it didn't happen right away. She lost her job, but she just kept going. She did not quit. And I'm happy to report she has her kids back, all 4 of her children. She's working, still doing the work too, but she has really come a long way. And I'm just really proud and happy to share that reunification story with you.
That is such a great story. Thank you, Kara. We could talk about that and unpack that a bit, but again, in the interest of time, I really want Adeseli to tell her story, her reunification success story that she recently had with one of her moms.
Okay, so my mom came in with a DV and substance abuse. She was doing amazing in the beginning. When we first met, I met her first attention. She was very determined, ready to go, just to do whatever she needed to do to get her babies back. When her babies were returned to her 3 months into the case, I got a phone call from her very early in the morning. Her baby died of the crib syndrome's death. So the baby forgot to breathe during the night. So she woke up to her baby dead in a crib. So I was on the phone with her. I reported to my supervisor, let him know I was going to go see her that morning. I got there. Honestly, I didn't even know what to say to her. I mean, what do you say to someone that just lost their baby and found, her son like that? So all I did was basically just hug her, listen to her cry, told her not to give up, to, have hope, pray. I ended up going to the funeral. It was I ever walked into. It was the smallest casket I've ever seen in my life. To this day, it tears me up. But this mom was such an amazing woman. It did not hinder anything in her case. She still went to her parenting classes. She did her DV classes. She did all her substance abuse treatment. She even graduated to be a medical assistant during all this that was going on in her life. Right now, she's currently going to school to be a registered nurse. I helped her get a sponsor. I got her into meetings. I went to meetings with her just to show her, how it was, because she's never been to a meeting before she got this dependency case. This woman's strength and hope and just her ambition for her kids and to move forward was so amazing after what she had to go through, losing a child. I can't even imagine what that felt like. So that was my reunification, and she's still currently going to school right now. I think she's going to start San Jose State soon as all this COVID is over.
Thank you. And Adesali, do I recall correctly that she gave you a big hug at the end of her case and said a few things to you?
Yeah, so this mom, oh God, I still remember when we closed her case and we were on DWC court, which is a dependency wellness court, which I work for. And it's a drug court where we, review cases and make sure that parents are on the right path. When her last court date, she hugged me and she held me so tight, and it was so genuine. It still gives me chills to right now. And she said that she wouldn't have been able to make it as far as she did without me. And it brings tears to my eyes because honestly, I was just there. I didn't really feel like I did anything. I just felt like I was, but it was so genuine. It was so hard to explain the feeling, but that right there gave me so much joy, more compassion, and made me want to do more for moms.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. And when Mimi asked us to talk a little bit about the interdisciplinary work in practice, you can certainly put different activities up on a PowerPoint with bullet points, but I thought that it would be a little bit more impactful to really tell some of these stories so that you can hear how creative and how responsive and how nimble a team like this is able to be with families that are in crisis. These are two powerful reunification stories that might not have happened without the additional levels of support that Kira and Adesali were able to offer. And I'm sure everyone listening is aware that there is no shortage of challenges to reunification. So while we are celebrating it and we are certainly improving outcomes with our interdisciplinary teams, not enough families are reunifying, and that's still the case. Kira, we don't have a lot of time here, and this could be a whole separate webinar, but can you talk about a couple of these challenges to reunification that continue to exist and how you see this team as helping?
Yes, so we'll talk about two. Timelines is probably one of the ones that really impacts our families in a negative way. I get it. I understand we don't want children just, stuck in the child welfare system for an extended period of time. But a lot of the parents that we work with, and I want to say this to everybody listening, when we intervene, when we come into these families' lives, we need to think trauma first. And I say that not just about the incident, but the history, what got us to this point, not the incident that brought us into care, but the generational trauma, the incest or the abuse that the parents endured that then put their life on this trajectory that put them here where their children are in care. So timelines are put in place, one, to keep children out of the system for an extended period of time. But how do you put a timeline on healing for a parent that, like Araceli, for years had used drugs, and you got 6 months to get it together if your child is under the age of 5? Those timelines, a lot of times for our parents, are just unrealistic. So one of the things that I try to do in my capacity is when I see a parent that might be struggling or having a hard time getting it together to get on track with those timelines, is advocate when I can, and in spaces where we can, for more time. Continue to support that parent and push them towards getting the help. But I try to be realistic. I can push you to complete a class or to get involved in some type of service, but is it going to be sustaining if you really don't get the time to do the work to repair the trauma and the injuries that have occurred across the lifespan? So timelines are a big one. And like Annalisa said, that could be a whole nother webinar. The other is the current climate. We've been hit really hard on the West Coast, and I know the East Coast as well, with COVID. Basically, parents that may have been days away from unsupervised visits or overnights or reunification, all of that came to a screeching halt. And they were separated from their children for like now 3 months, you know, some of them. And that separation, we know for the kids, it's anxiety provoking. For the mom that I talked about, she had 2 children that are under the age of 5 and was forced to go to video visits. Zoom visits for 2-year-olds are not the most productive visits. Mom had a lot of anxiety and fear about her kids forgetting her because she couldn't touch them, she couldn't hug them, you know, she couldn't give them kisses. And the only contact that she had was through a Zoom visit. And that was really hard to navigate. And sometimes the caregivers that were responsible for the children, you know, you got the kids in the house all day, and then you've got to build in this time for them to connect with their mom on Zoom for 2 hours or FaceTime. And there were just a lot of issues with that, just COVID. And the other thing I want to speak to is the disproportionality of race and how our families are showing up in this system. And we know that there are more Black and brown families that are a part of the system. And we really need to do something and say something and be present when it comes to that. This is a real issue. And it's something that we have to, one, check our bias when it comes to working with families. And when we see other people doing things, we have to be strong enough to say something about it and not allow it to happen. I know as a Black woman, I go into spaces and a lot of times I'm already judged by the color of my skin, by, you know, my gender as well. You know, there's a number of things that I know that I face, and our families face this on even a higher level. They're judged by the side of town that they live on. They're judged by poverty and issues of inequality. They're judged by their affiliations. They're judged by all these things before they can even get support and services. So I feel like our goal and our responsibility as a trauma-informed, a knowledgeable, a team that has a specific skill set, that we interrupt these things and we take a stance on these things as we support these families as they navigate this very challenging system.
Here I go again with muting. Thank you, Kira. That was so well said. You know, I'll just say, having worked first as a family defense attorney without the support of a social worker or a mentor parent working alongside me years ago, and now seeing the experience of how much richer that representation is because our attorneys and our clients have the benefit of this team, I don't think we can ever go backwards. This is a whole other level of advocacy. And, you know, I wish we had more time to talk about funding and program development, because somebody asked a question about failing forward. You know, interdisciplinary teams are game changers, but they aren't effective overnight. And integrating these different roles into a law office for the first time requires some thoughtful planning. And in the last decade, we've certainly made mistakes and we've learned a lot. We started with, you know, 1 or 2 part-time peer mentors and had to figure out how to create an office that really valued everyone equally. And we were able to build all of those positions, expand the positions, make them full-time, make sure that they were fully benefited, bring in clinical support, all of the things we didn't have planned in our minds right at the beginning. And then we had to find the money to do that. Who are our funding allies? Who are our natural allies to help support this interdisciplinary teaming? One of the things that, you know, was helpful for us was we have a great relationship with adult probation in our county. And adult probation signed a contract with us funding a full interdisciplinary team to work with parents on probation for open cases, but also half of that team's caseload are prevention cases, pre-petition, because we are trying to get in front of that that incident that leads to a family, you know, having to come formally into the child welfare system. So it's about really looking around you and leveraging the things that you're learning, constantly being willing to be taught, and also those relationships that you're forming with your natural allies in the community who want to do better for families. So I hope it is evident, though, that the investment and the mistakes and all of the learning is worth it. I think just listening to Kira and Araceli, I could hear them talk all day, but that is the nutshell. that's it for us for now. And I really hope that folks who have questions will reach out to us with the contact information that Mimi can provide. And on behalf of all of us at DAC, I want to wish everyone a happy Reunification Month, and I'll send it back to Mimi.
Thank you, Annalisa. And before I let you go, will you put your email in the chat? Because I think people are going to want it right away.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much, Annalisa, Kira, and Araceli. It was perfect and beautiful, and I think people, just based on the questions and the comments, got a lot out of you sharing both about reunification, but also just the work that you do as a team. So again, thank you so very much. And thank you to our first panel for setting the stage, explaining the funding, explaining what this model can look like. I want to let everybody know that, as I think Marty mentioned at the very beginning, the model looks different in different places, and although revolve around the idea of a lawyer working with other professionals like parent mentors and social workers and housing lawyers and immigration lawyers and education specialists and all of the stakeholders that can support families. If you want more information, you can certainly reach out to me. I'm happy to put you in touch with the leaders around the country who are doing this work. You could go onto the Family Justice Initiative website, familyjusticeinitiative.org, where we have a how-to on implementing a multidisciplinary model of representation. And so again, thank you all so very much for joining us. Happy end of Reunification Month and bringing this message forward all year long. And please just reach out if you need anything. There will be a recording, as I mentioned at the beginning, and that recording will be shared with everybody who registered today. So again, thank you and have a wonderful day.